My father-in-law accidentally tipped a full glass of Cabernet directly onto my competition model. "Some blueprints just don't hold up, son," he smirked. I tripped, sending the entire half-full bottle cascading over his pristine, cream-colored Zegna suit. He gasped, the dark red stain blooming across his chest like a gruesome wound. "Clumsy night," I stated flatly. That was the moment the silent war became loud. For years, Liam Peterson, a 35-year-old architect, had existed in a state of low-grade hostility with my wife's parents, Eleanor and Robert Vance. My profession, the art of creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional, was, in their eyes, little more than an amusing but unstable hobby. Robert, a man who built his real estate empire on cheap materials and fast turnarounds, would refer to my work as playing with expensive Legos. Eleanor, who measured life's worth by the square footage of one's home and the prestige of one's country club, would introduce me with a dismissive wave of her hand as Chloe's husband. He does design work. That single, ruinous splash of wine wasn't an accident, it was a declaration. I had observed their preparations all evening. Eleanor had insisted I bring the model for my firm's biggest competition yet, a new city library, to her ostentatious dinner party. Robert had strategically placed the open bottle of wine precariously close to the edge of the console table where my model was displayed. His move was a calculated stress test designed to make me crack in front of his influential friends. My reaction was a structural failure they hadn't anticipated. Chloe and I met 7 years ago. It was on a walking tour of Chicago's historic district that I was volunteering to lead. She was a history teacher, hanging on every word I said about the Rookery Building's light court and the genius of Burnham and Root. We had coffee afterwards, talking for hours. She understood that a building was more than brick and mortar. It was a story, a vessel for human experience. I fell for her sharp mind and her genuine warmth. She fell for the passion I had for creating lasting structures. We were married within 2 years. Her parents, however, were part of the foundation I had to build our life upon, and it was deeply flawed. Our backgrounds were a study in contrasts. I came from a family of academics and engineers, people who valued intellectual curiosity and meticulous craftsmanship. The Vances valued profit margins and public perception. They lived in a sprawling, gaudy mansion that I privately nicknamed the McMansion of Bad Taste, a perfect reflection of Robert's development portfolio. Chloe and I lived in a restored mid-century modern bungalow, a home we'd lovingly brought back to life, its clean lines and honest materials a testament to our shared values. This fundamental difference was the source of all conflict. To Robert, my refusal to work for his company designing cookie-cutter subdivisions was a personal insult. To Eleanor, my preference for a quiet life of substance over a loud one of social climbing was an embarrassment. Their interference was relentless and systematic. They would casually run into us at restaurants while we were on a date, Eleanor loudly mentioning Chloe's incredibly successful ex-boyfriend, a private equity manager. They gifted us a luxury SUV for our wedding, a vehicle whose maintenance and insurance costs were a subtle financial burden, a constant reminder of their wealth and our relative modesty. Once, after I won a prestigious regional award, Eleanor arranged a family dinner, not to celebrate, but to have Robert spend the entire evening lecturing me on the real world and how awards don't pay mortgages. Chloe would squeeze my hand under the table, her eyes pleading for my patience. The ruined model was simply the next phase of their campaign. It wasn't just about embarrassing me, it was about invalidating my life's work and proving to Chloe that she had married a man whose dreams were as fragile as balsa wood and glue. The day after the disastrous dinner party, I didn't rage. I became an investigator. Architects are trained to see what others miss. The subtle cracks in a facade, the telltale signs of stress, the logic behind a design. I took high-resolution photos of the stained model from every conceivable angle. I went back to my office and, using my design software, created a 3D simulation of the living room layout, the table, the model, and the wine glass. I ran a physics-based trajectory analysis. An accidental spill would have resulted in a dispersed, arsing splash. This was a direct downward pour. It was deliberate. I hacked into the family's shared cloud account for their photo stream, a space I usually avoided. Buried in a recently deleted folder, I found a text from Eleanor to Robert sent an hour before the guests arrived. Model is on the console. Make it look believable. My heart went cold. As a final step, I discreetly asked the Vance's long-time housekeeper, Maria, if she had noticed anything unusual. She reluctantly admitted that Mr. Vance had insisted on pouring that specific bottle himself, something he never did, and had moved the silver coaster from its usual spot. I had my preliminary evidence, a digital reconstruction, a damning text message, and a witness to the setup. The blueprint of their malice was becoming clear. I needed an ally. My first thought was Chloe, but showing her this cold, hard proof felt too brutal. She loved her parents despite their flaws. So, I called her younger sister, Sarah. She was married to a hedge fund manager Robert approved of, but I'd always sensed a deep unhappiness in her. We met for coffee. I laid out my findings, showing her the simulation on my laptop and the screenshot of the text. She wasn't surprised. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "They do things like this?" "Liam," she whispered. "They broke up my engagement to a musician I loved in college. They told me he was cheating and I think they paid a woman to lie. Then she gave me the critical piece of information I needed. They have a nanny cam in the living room, supposedly to watch the dog. It's hidden in the bookshelf. Eleanor is obsessed with it. The feed is stored on a separate cloud service. She told me the password once when she was drunk. That was it. The key to the locked room. That night, my hands shaking slightly, I logged into the security camera's cloud storage. It took me an hour of scrolling through mundane footage of the dog sleeping, but then I found it. A video from 2 nights before the party. It showed Robert and Eleanor in the living room, planning. "Is so proud of this ridiculous thing." Eleanor's voice sneered from my laptop speakers. "If he looks like a fool, like he can't even protect his own work, Chloe will start to see. She'll see he's not a provider. He's a liability." Robert nodded, a cruel smile on his face. "One spill. It has to look like a complete accident." I had it. The undeniable, core evidence. It was a perfect, self-contained record of their conspiracy. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was a profound, chilling sadness, mixed with a surge of protective anger for Chloe. They weren't just attacking me, they were systematically trying to dismantle their own daughter's happiness for the sake of their ego. My grief hardened into resolve. My training is in creating structures that are built to last, that can withstand unforeseen pressures. I would approach this demolition and reconstruction of our family dynamic with the same precision. I began assembling my evidence into a coherent presentation, a timeline of manipulation, every text, every passive-aggressive comment, every major incident. It was the as-built drawing of their treachery. I devised a plan, not for revenge, but for liberation. Before anything else, I needed to ensure my foundation was solid. I needed Chloe. I chose a quiet Sunday afternoon. I didn't start with the video. I started by asking her, gently, about her sister Sarah's broken engagement. I asked her if she ever felt her parents' love came with conditions. Tears welled in her eyes. "All the time," she admitted softly. Then, I showed her the text from her mother. She stared at it, her face pale. "It could be a misunderstanding," she whispered, the familiar reflex to defend them kicking in. "Okay," I said calmly. "Let me show you a structural analysis I did." I pulled up the 3D simulation on my laptop, explaining the physics of the spill. Her brow furrowed. As a history teacher, she appreciated evidence-based arguments. Finally, with a deep breath, I said, "There's one more thing you need to see. This is the only way to be sure." I played the nanny cam video. I held her hand as she watched, her knuckles white. She made a small, choked sound when she heard her mother's voice. When it was over, she sat in silence for a full minute, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a new, fierce clarity. "What do we do?" she asked. My presentation became our presentation. We didn't just have the recent evidence, we now had context. We reached out to Marcus, Chloe's ex-fiancé who her parents had driven away years ago. He reluctantly shared old, manipulative emails from Eleanor, adding another layer to our evidence chain. Sarah provided a written statement about her own experiences. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. It wasn't just about me. It was about Robert and Eleanor's pathological need to design their children's lives, bulldozing anyone who didn't fit their master plan. The evidence was now an entire portfolio, a comprehensive report detailing years of emotional and psychological abuse, complete with video, text messages, and third-party testimony. We were ready for the final review. We called a family meeting at our house. Our turf. Sarah and her husband came. Then, Robert and Eleanor arrived, confident and imperious, clearly expecting to intimidate me into an apology. "Robert, Eleanor, thank you for coming." I began, my voice steady. Chloe stood by my side, her hand firmly in mine. We felt it was time to review the foundation of this family. Robert scoffed. "What is this, Liam? Another one of your dramatic projects?" "In a way, yes," I replied, and clicked the remote for the projector. For the next hour, they were forced to watch a systematic dismantling of their lives' lies. I started with my model, my analysis. Robert blustered, calling it absurd conspiracy. Then I put up the text message. Eleanor went pale, stammering that her phone must have been hacked. They denied everything, trying to twist the narrative, painting me as a paranoid, divisive influence. But for every lie, I had a piece of irrefutable evidence. Sarah read her statement, her voice trembling but strong. Her husband looked at her, then at his in-laws, with dawning horror. The final exhibit was the nanny cam video. We played it on the large screen. The audio was crystal clear. In the dead silence of our living room, their own voices condemned them. Robert's face was ashen. Eleanor simply stared at the screen, her mask of composure shattering into a million pieces. Chloe spoke, her voice ringing with the authority of someone who had finally claimed their own power. All my life, I believed your definition of success. Of love. But this isn't love. It's control. It's cruel, she said, her voice breaking but firm. You have caused so much pain. To me, to Sarah, to Liam. To people you never even gave a chance. It was a full-scale emotional demolition. The power dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. The Vances, for the first time in their lives, were left with no leverage, no arguments, no facade. They were exposed. The summary of their intervention was damning, a multi-year campaign to manipulate and control their daughters' lives, driven by narcissism and a deep-seated insecurity. The sanction was delivered by Chloe and me as a united front, a mandatory 6-month period of no contact. After that, any relationship would be on our terms and would be conditional on them attending family therapy. No more unsolicited gifts. No more unannounced visits. Our life was our own design now, not theirs. The following months were a quiet reconstruction. Eleanor and Robert tried to breach the new boundaries. Of course, frantic phone calls, guilt-tripping emails, even showing up at Chloe's school. Each time, we calmly but firmly reinforced the boundary. It was a difficult, painful process, but with each successfully defended border, our own foundation grew stronger. Chloe and I found a new rhythm, unburdened by the weight of her parents' expectations. We started planning a small extension on our house, a new sunroom I designed for us. It was a joyful, collaborative process. We were building our future, literally. The real test, the confirmation of our victory, came 5 months later. A formal request for proposal arrived at my firm from Vance Development. They were building a new community arts center, a pro bono project meant to improve their tarnished public image, and they wanted my firm to submit a design. There was no personal note, just a professional document. It was a ceasefire, an admission. It was Robert Vance acknowledging, in the only language he understood, business, that I was not a failure. I was a professional whose skills he needed. We won the contract. My soul finally felt at peace. The storm had passed, leaving behind the clean, solid structure of my life with Chloe. There was no lingering bitterness, just a quiet sense of firmness. The final wisdom I'd gleaned was simple. An axiom of both architecture and life: a beautiful facade means nothing if the foundation is rotten. We hadn't won by fighting them on their terms, with schemes and power plays. We won by building something they never could: a life founded on honesty, mutual respect, and a love strong enough to withstand any pressure. It was a structure built to last,